We're still calling this Dodger debate.
Time is a flat circle if we're right back to this exact same conversation, like the third recording in a row. It's too late. When
All right.
Plasky comes on, we'll have a real debate. We could debate about the B guy. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, what a hero, I guess. That's the thing though, right? Like that becomes a thing in like Phoenix. Like didn't some guy show up, like some fan show up in like in a B
Yeah,
outfit the
the
next
next day.
the beekeeper? Yeah, like
Great sports city, Phoenix.
it's such a small that's
Just
like
let them enjoy
such
what
a
they can
cow
enjoy. They
town,
have no
dude.
hockey team. The NBA team stinks.
Good for you, Jack, that you made it out of there.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
here you are thriving in the big city.
Thank you.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Thriving,
Good job.
for
Just
sure.
pulling yourself out for the bootstraps and taking on the world.
Hello and welcome back to the Dodger Debate. I'm Jack Harris, along with our LA Times columnist Dylan Hernandez, who is returning from the world of basketball that he's been living in for the last month. Dylan, who is more disappointing this postseason? That'll be my first question to you: the Lakers or the Clippers?
Well, the Clippers aren't out yet. I mean, they could still win.
Oh, sure they're not.
But you know what I really like, what I've gotten used to at those Clipper games? Whenever Norman Powell scores, the PA guy screams and goes, Norman, pow, pow, pow. For some reason, I really like that.
This this is like the Korean PA guy with Mookie Betts.
Yeah. Although yeah, I guess I would say the Clippers. I mean, the Lakers actually played well. They just
I know.
aren't that good.
You're trying to
Uh,
will some Dave Roberts 3-0 magic on them.
yeah, here's the thing though, man. Like speaking of Dave Roberts, right? Talk about like what happened to Darvin Ham. I mean, Rob Pelinka, some nerve, huh? Hey, coach this crap team. Oh, we lost. What a shock. You
Hmm.
know, I
I'm
was
just
Kobe's agent, so I don't
I'm
get fired.
I'm just waiting for the Suns to run the same playbook on the former Laker coach,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then they can both duke it out for Ty Lue.
The Lakers can't afford him.
Yeah, that's our quick minute of basketball. Hey, well, while you've been gone, the Dodgers, I know you've been paying attention, but the
It
Dodgers
happened.
have had two very different kind of a homestand and a road trip. They have the homestand where they go 3-6 on it, part of a 3-7 extended stretch. The offense wasn't very good. The starting pitching wasn't very good. The bullpen looked really weak. And then they go on this, what was kind of a tough road trip, maybe not opponent wise, but they have to go to Washington, to Toronto, to Phoenix, no travel days. At the end of this just kind of trek across the world they've had to begin their season. And they played really well. They won 7 to 9 games on this trip. They won all three of the series. Yoshinobu Yamamoto was a lot better in the two starts he made. Tyler Glasnow looked good. The offense had 3 or 4 10-run games. And the question I have for you to kick this off is, which of those two versions of the team is the one you think we're going to see more of the rest of this year? The one that, maybe not isn't going to be losing 7 out of 10 games, but had some of these issues with the rotation and situational hitting and finding the right pieces in the pen, or the one that was able to just blow opponents out, got consistently good starts, kind of addressed a lot of the things that popped up on that homestand that, given it was the first couple of weeks of the season and they were a game over 500 at one point, did seem a little bit worrisome.
Yeah, I think the team on the road trip is that what we're going to see over the course of 162. We've seen this year after year, right? Even I can't remember the last time who I was talking, on some radio program or podcast. I did say, look, this is going to correct itself. They're always good in the regular season. This is going to be no problem, and I still think that. Um, I do, however, wonder if the team that we saw the previous homestand might be the team that we see in October, right? So those are the kind of the two different things. I mean, right? That what we saw like in that last homestand was just a little too familiar, right? It felt
Right.
like October, except without the towels waving and stuff, and so right, but the kind of the luxury I do think that they have though is that they have between now and the end of October, right, or September to like figure these problems out. Because I do think, I mean, what are they up now? Like 4.5 games, 5 games?
Yeah,
I mean,
four and a
right?
half in the
Yeah,
division.
four and a
By
half. I
far the
mean,
biggest division lead anybody has right now.
yeah, see, so they're going to run away with this thing, and that's going to give them time to kind of figure stuff out, right? That's also going to give them time to maybe not run some guys into the ground, right? If a guy starts laboring a little bit, they have luxuries that other teams don't have. But you're in LA, right? Like Darvin Ham found out today, the consequences to not winning the whole thing, and no matter these guys can go out and win 100 and whatever games, and if they don't do it in October, it's not going to matter. So that to me is kind of the challenge for them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the homestand part. This is a team that you you go on a trip like this and you're reminded that the Dodgers just have a lot more talent than a lot of other clubs. Like even the Diamondbacks, who were feisty last year and are going through some injury problems right now. It's like Corbin Carroll's their worst hitter. The rotation's a mess. Like the Dodgers, generally speaking, are in a pretty good place. But yeah, that homestand, the not hitting with runners in scoring position, the Freddie Freeman, like kind of looking, going through one of those stretches where you're just reminded, like, oh yeah, he's kind of human. I think similar to what happened in the DS last year, where the rotation, even Tyler Glasnow struggled in one of those games. And like you said, it's just there are a lot of those little things that popped up that reminded you of previous Octobers that, again, I think we've talked about this before, but for having a $300 million payroll, for having spent as much money as they did this winter, it's still hard to like fix every hole you have on a team. Now, the top four that they have in the lineup now, especially with the way that Shohei Ohtani's turned it on this month, Mookie Betts has probably been the best player in baseball this month. Will Smith has been solid, and Freddie Freeman had a really strong road trip, after that homestand. Like that's a reminder that they're going to win a lot of games still. When the rotation is on, like that group could be a strength. But, as you look at this team right now, again, we're in agreement here on this is still built to be a really good regular season team. Like what are the parts specifically as you start to look out at, decisions they might need to make leading up to the trade deadline, decisions they're going to need to make internally with their roster? Like what are the parts of this team that, moving forward here, you're going to kind of be watching to see, okay, is that an area of concern? Is that a spot they're going to need to improve? Like where do you kind of look at this club right now and still have, if not concerns, questions that are going to have to be answered?
Yeah, well, obviously the bullpen, right? I mean, if you can pick up another starting pitcher, I mean, anybody can use another starting pitcher, right? I think defense, right, in terms of like kind of the questions I think that they have to answer and really kind of deliberate whether they're going to make these moves or not. Like, right, the defense kind of like, bottom half of the lineup thing, right? In terms of, right, is Muncy kind of worth kind of, right? I mean, he has been better. Actually,
He's been good
he's
defensively.
been pretty good. So but that side of the infield obviously scares you a little bit, you know. And while he is a guy that's going to run into one and probably in a series give you a big hit or a big home run, right? To me, he and Teoscar Hernandez are the two guys that kind of, right, can kind of go either way, right? In terms of like when those guys are hitting, I think you really like it because that four is now six.
Right.
And if they're not, right, now all of a sudden you have like just like, the bottom five just don't hit at all.
And the two guys at the top of that who are going to have the most opportunities to drive in runs. Like I think Teoscar Hernandez has the most at bats with runners in scoring position in the majors this year. And those are strikeout prone guys. Another big difference between the homestand and the road trip. They were leading the MLB in strikeouts going into it. And then they had a game with 0 strikeouts in Phoenix. And I think had the lowest strikeout rate among anybody in the last week and a half.
Yeah, I find it interesting, right? It kind of feels like wasn't there a game where they started Rojas like at second and
2 games.
Yeah, right. So they're really kind of pushed their chips in on this Mookie thing, which I guess if you're going to do it, I'd like, like if you're going to do it, I do think you got to go all in on this thing, right? Because of Mookie Betts' stature as a player, right? I don't think he wants to kind of be jerked around this way and that. So I do like, I guess, the fact that if they're going to do it, I do think that this is how you do it, where you're just like, okay, this is our guy, and we're going to like, and he's out there putting in the work, which, I mean, to be honest, again, like concerns me, right? I mean, he's not just out there. This isn't just taking like routes. I mean, this guy's moving out there, right? He's getting a full workout before every game, and you do kind of start to wonder, okay, what's this gonna, right? How's his body gonna hold up? But so far, again, we're just a month into the season. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to tell.
The Mookie point is one that I think of all these kind of decisions when you're talking about, okay, how do they need to set the roster up long term? That's the first one, right? And I think I would have even said a couple weeks ago that, they probably should still try to go out and maybe find a more reliable, prototypical, everyday shortstop if they can go get one. Watching Mookie the last couple weeks, though, what I'm starting to get the sense of, like, this is a guy who talks about, I want to be a Hall of Famer. I want to be a legendary player. And he doesn't do it in like a selfish way, right? In that way, but like that's just kind of how he views his career is in these big like I want to leave my mark on the game. And what this season is starting to feel like to me, when you account for how he's played at the plate, the fact he's stealing more bases, he's being more engaged in a lot of different parts of the game. And so much of that to me revolves around the shortstop thing, right? Where this was a challenge that is forcing him on a daily basis to approach baseball in just a way he hadn't been doing the last couple of years. Like this year's almost starting to feel like the opposite of that 2021 season when he had the hip injury and he just kind of seemed out of it. And he didn't have a bad year, but his OPS was like 860 or something. Like this is the reverse. To me, this is the kind of year, and now he hasn't said this, but this is the kind of year that somebody like this, in my view, probably almost looks at it as like this could be like a signature season for me, right? Like this could be the year that people remember, like, oh, that's the year Mookie went to shortstop and not only handled shortstop at an adequate level, but then was the best hitter in baseball on top of it and started stealing bases again on top of it, and was the best player on this team with three other MVPs on it by a good distance. I think right now he's like plus 150 to win the MVP. It's May 3rd. And he's already almost even odds for this award when one of his teammates like also has an 1100 OPS or whatever it is. And that's what's been interesting to me is, the defense I think has been kind of average from him. But I'm getting the sense, and I think people around the Dodgers are getting the sense, that he looks at this season and this opportunity and playing shortstop as something that's animating him. And I think you have to account for that moving forward as you start to evaluate. I think that's why you're seeing him play there every day. Miguel Rojas playing second base a little bit. And of all the things that, when you try to look long term at this team, I think that's the one that is quickly becoming like a permanent thing. Like you cannot, like, however you're going to try to build this team for October, it probably needs to have Mookie Betts at shortstop, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, and here's the thing too is, right, I think the expectation or the hope of everybody else is that he can be adequate at shortstop. I guarantee you, right, knowing Mookie Betts, he's thinking, I'm going to become a Gold Glove shortstop one
Sure.
day,
Sure.
So good test coming up this weekend. We got the good old Braves coming into town. What are
Well,
your thoughts kind of going into this series?
I mean, it will be nice to see them play like a legitimate team and a legitimate lineup, which is something that eh, we haven't quite seen even going back to that homestand, right? Like they've played teams that probably can pitch a lot better than they've been able to hit. And I think that's one of the things when you're trying to evaluate the starting rotation in particular that can be a little difficult. This weekend, yeah, you're going to get Stone, you're going to get Glasnow going tomorrow, which I think is going to be a really interesting game too to see how this guy looks again against that kind of level of lineup. I kind of wish we got to see Yoshinobu Yamamoto in this series for that same reason. But yeah, this is as much of as far as like a litmus test goes for it being May 3rd. Like this is as much as one. And I think it's especially for the pitching staff because that's the area so far for me that has the biggest questions. Obviously in the bullpen with all the injuries they have there right now, they just lost Ryan Brazier for what could be a month or two with this calf injury. Blake Treinen's going to be coming back at some point. But again, like if he's going to be going right into a leverage spot for a guy who hasn't pitched in 2 years, probably not great. The fact that Alex Vezia, for as well as he's done, is suddenly back into a leverage role after not being anywhere near one a couple weeks ago is just reflective of like the ever evolving nature of this Dodger bullpen right now. And one that, for as good as it's been the last couple weeks, and was having a really good road trip up until that B game in Arizona when the D-backs walked them off. I want to see it against a better team. And then the same goes for the rotation. Because right now, like to me, of all the little things of this team that would maybe not concern me, but I still have the biggest question about, it is who are the top two guys in the rotation? And is it going to be Glasnow and Yamamoto? Is Glasnow going to stay healthy the whole year to be able to do that? Is Yamamoto really the guy he's looked like the last couple starts? Because if it is those two guys, that could work, right? If you're getting a really good Tyler Glasnow and Yamamoto, that's probably good enough to have a legitimate World Series rotation with the other options they're going to be able to put in behind it. But already a couple times this year, whether it was Yamamoto, whether it was the bad Glasnow start against the Nats, or just that weird cramp thing that popped up in Toronto, like those are just little reminders that, as we've seen the last couple of years, the rotation can go sideways quickly. And yeah, so to see Glasnow in a start like he's going to get tomorrow, just going to be interesting. And I think longer term for the Dodgers, right? It's like if something happens to one of those two guys, what do you have? Walker Buehler's coming back on Monday. He's obviously kind of an X factor and all that. If he can look like the pitcher, anything close to the kind of pitcher he was pre-injury. And then obviously, moving forward, like that's, I think, the one area that's always going to have to be keep being evaluated, because that's the one spot, if you're the Dodgers this year, you cannot get to October with your pants down as they've had the last couple postseasons.
With Bueller, obviously, I think it was like a fan fest, right? When he came in, like you just kind of saw the extra weight on him. And I was just kind of, I mean, my initial thing was just like, right. I mean, this is a guy who has like a very athletic kind of Tim Lincecum like delivery, right? Where a lot of it is kind of striding off the mound, basically, and um, right. I was kind of wondering, okay, can he be Walker Buehler, 20 pounds heavier than he used to be? What is the organization kind of when they're looking at him right now, right? I mean, I think it's kind of one thing again, if you let's say, 1, 2, 3, like you're really sure what you have there. I mean, I do think at this point, Glass now is like he's pitching like an ace, right? And it's more of a can he stay healthy?
Right.
But, you're not really sure 2, you're not really sure 3. Because if you have the first solid 3, Bueller would almost feel like a luxury at this point, right? Some guys falling out of the sky, and who knows, maybe he's an all-star again. At this point right now, what do they need him to be, and what are they realistically expecting him to be?
The need him to be question depends a lot more, as I was talking about earlier, on kind of what happens around him, right? I think at the bare minimum, you want him to be somebody who is an option for your playoff rotation going into the postseason, right? Like that would be the ideal, is if he, is good enough to be like the game 3 starter for you. That's a pretty good result. Whether he's going to get there, I think is something even Dodger people are kind of waiting to see. I think they think like stuff wise, he still has the ability. Like you're still seeing pretty good velo in these rehab starts he's had. The reports have been his breaking stuff still plays at a pretty good level. I think the biggest question is going to be, this is a guy who pre-injury, especially in key moments, could rear back and beat guys with his fastball, right? Like that was the kind of level of pitcher he was. So it was for all his other weapons, when he's facing a bases loaded jam in the NLCS against the Braves, where he's trying to get out of the one the next year, when he's facing Eddie Rosario, it's fastball, fastball, fastball. It's cutter, cutter, cutter. It's I'm going to go after you and I'm going to just try to beat you with my best stuff in the zone. And for a guy coming off a second TJ now, even though the velos looked good, it hasn't been quite where it was before. There's no guarantee that when he really needs it to be there, like when he could really reach back and hit 97, 98, he can do that anymore. And I think that there is an understanding from people around the Dodgers that he is probably going to need to pitch somewhat differently. He's going to need to adjust to just the new realities he has physically, to the fact that he hasn't thrown at the major league level in 2 years. Dave Roberts said he still wants to see Walker Buehler attack, but he wants to see him attack more with breaking pitches, with secondary stuff, maybe having to be a little bit craftier. And I think that's the biggest question for him, right? As you have a guy who is, as much as maybe anybody in the organization, believes in himself, believes in this way he likes to pitch, is uber competitive and doesn't want to back down from situations. And not that the new way he's going to have to pitch is backing down, but it's going to probably have to be a little bit different, right? He's going to have to attack hitters differently than he did pre-injury. And, mentally, as much as anything, just like kind of learning, who am I as a pitcher and how do I make that work, and, at bat by at bat and start by start, like that's going to be the process for him.
For the viewers that made it this far, there was an interesting nugget that came out of last night's like whatever that gala thing. At least like when Otani spoke to the Japanese reporters, or I don't know, maybe he said this. I have no idea who the audience was, but I just saw the quotes in one of the Japanese papers. That was the first concert he's ever been to.
I mean,
isn't that amazing?
It is, but like,
I
are we
mean,
really surprised with anything? I mean, well, we can end here. I think we've gotten to learn a lot more about Shohei Ohtani, the person, this last month or since the start of the year. I mean, what are the things that like stick out to you the most? Is it the concert? But I mean, some of the other stuff, right?
Yeah, well, because the other stuff we'd kind of heard of, right? It was just kind of like you're wondering, like, is all this stuff true, right? I mean, because when I went to Japan in 2017, pretty much all these things about him not caring about money and just right, it's all just baseball and certainly at least the way he's kind of chosen is right. like when to come here, who to, right? Everything has kind of been based around like his career. And so you kind of see like, okay, I think that kind of taught us, okay, well, at least like that stuff was true. Um, Now I guess that part of the other thing that, right, was just that he doesn't like go out, but I don't know. I just thought he'd been to like a concert,
I
but
mean,
I
I
guess,
to me that is like not a surprising thing to learn. It is like, oh, that's kind of strange, but and that's why this last month has been kind of interesting, right? Is the fact that for the first time that I can really remember in his MLB career, even just in his interactions with the media or his teammates behind the scenes, he's starting to seem like I mean, maybe saying like a normal person is a bit of an overstatement, but like you're seeing just like more typical interactions, right? Like before we go to Toronto, we're asking him about the flight, he kind of laughs about it. He didn't say much. He said, "Oh, I wasn't on the plane, or I knew I wasn't on the plane, so I was curious about it too." But like, he leaned into it a little bit and was laughing when he was getting booed there, right? His answer was, "Oh, I just respect the passion of the fans or whatnot." But again, you ask him about it, he shows a little chuckle. Like there's these, and now like this gala thing. He's at a concert. He's there with his wife. It's just like he's starting to feel there's been a lot of little things that are just like, oh, that's a very normal player kind of situation, which I know like there were examples of that in Anaheim, like the samurai helmet thing, and he would play video games with his teammates. But for how this year has gone and all of the gambling scandal related stuff that surrounded him, the fact that he started to seem more kind of like your average player in some of these small moments, that's been a little bit surprising to me. And I think if you're the Dodgers, you have to feel good about, because there was a world, right, where all this stuff happens and he really just closes into a shell, and he's really hard for teammates to get to or coaches to get to, and doesn't show any sort of personality. And that has not been what has happened, which I think me and a lot of other people probably would have expected had you told us a month ago that, hey, there's going to be this situation that surrounds him in the first month of the year.
yeah, what's interesting is, right, and I was kind of slightly at the, initially kind of taken aback at just how direct Roberts was about this, but it just, right, that it would be easier to communicate with him without Ipe there. And it kind of seems like that's actually been the case, right? I mean, it sounds like other players, right, kind of have described, that it was kind of, he was hard to approach because Ipe was always like right next to him, right? Where it sounds like Will Ireton, the new interpreter, gives him a little space. And
I
yeah,
mean,
kind
you
of like
see
you
him
said,
walk
right? I think,
around
yeah,
alone at the stadium, which you would never see before.
right. Which, and I think that they're, kind of like, right, like you said, they're more like normal interactions now taking place. And so, yeah, like you said, I do think if you're the team, like you have to kind of feel good about that, and because you're never quite, I always felt like in Anaheim, everything felt like a negotiation, right? And with Ipe kind of being his kind of de facto manager there. And now you can have more direct, right? And this stuff is going to start to matter next year, right? When he starts pitching, right? Because now the communication is going to be very important, you know. And so yeah, I think you're right. That's a good thing. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm still kind of like surprised that he hadn't been to like a concert.
We'll reconvene again. Hope Plashke is still caught up with basketball. Lakers made some moves today, but yeah, when we get it back on, this will really be a debate again. So yeah, but thank you guys for watching. You can follow along with all our stuff at latimes.com. It's been a busy start to the season, and yeah, a lot more coming up. So we'll see you next time.